Telltales The Walking Dead has arguably the greatest duo in the history of any sort of game ever, right? Lee and Clem, these two have always had amazing chemistry together. Throughout the entire course of the first season, they develop a father-daughter like connection. But today, I wanted to explore what would have happened if these two had never met each other. I want to come up with a little game theory. I want to have a little bit of fun with this. And let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. What would have happened to both Lee and Clem if these two had never met each other at the start of the apocalypse? Now, for argument's sake, let's say that when Lee jumps over the fence, right, into the backyard, let's say he just doesn't go inside the house. He just exits out to the fence, meets Sean and Chet, and goes on to Herschel's farm. And Clem is in the treehouse, I guess you could say, in the treehouse, all by herself. What would have happened from there? Well, if you start off from Clem's point of view, because this one is kind of sad, but it's probably true, she most likely, A, would have just died due to starvation or dehydration, some sort of, malnutrition of some sort, or B, someone else would have came along and found her, and who knows what would have happened, right? It's a zombie apocalypse. It could have been a crazy person looking to hurt her, or she could have found someone else who's just like Lee and wanted to protect her. But the most likely scenario, in my opinion, is she eventually would have ended up dying, because someone would have had to find her relatively quickly before she ran out of water, before she ran out of food, and find her alive and well. Because chances are, when it's the apocalypse and people are freaking out, if she's like on the verge of death, people are not going to want to save her, even if she's a little girl. Because a lot of people have that selfish need to want to stay alive by any means necessary. So I don't think that she would have really gotten very far if Lee never found her. But if you ask me what would have happened to Lee, this is where it gets interesting, right? Because I don't think a whole lot of things would have changed necessarily, right? He still would have went to Herschel's farm, still would have gotten kicked off the farm after Sean died, still would have went with Kenny to make it. Like, a lot of that stuff stays the same. The only difference being is that he potentially would not have died. But this makes the whole scenario with the stranger a lot more interesting, because the reason why the stranger contacted Clem and, was trying to kidnap her and did end up kidnapping her was because of the fact that Lee and the group took from the stranger's car at the end of episode 2. So that still would have happened regardless whether or not Clem was there, but the stranger would have had to find a different way to get his revenge. And in the process, Lee might not have died. We might have gotten an entirely different ending, but the thing is that it wouldn't have been as emotionally heartfelt as the original ending that we did end up getting. But this encounter with the stranger would have been a lot more interesting. I still think he would have followed the group all the way down to Savannah. I still think he probably would have approached outside the gate to see where they were staying. Something would have happened. The only difference being is that there'd be no walkie-talkie to communicate. So he most likely would have been like a stalker type. If you remember what happened with like Joe Lee at the end of episode 2, where it showed her like recording the group, something similar like that would have happened with this guy, except he would have probably seen what they were doing, saw the RV leaving the camp after the raid, probably would have followed them to some sort of capacity, right? It would have been harder for him to track, but I do believe to a certain extent that this whole thing with the stranger could have absolutely went down in a similar fashion, but without Clem, there's not really any way to get any sort of leverage. So I believe that this would have kind of ended up resulting in some sort of 1v1 confrontation once and for all, where one of them ends up dying. And you could have, spun it in a way where maybe Lee still ends up dying. Even if the stranger dies, Lee could still die as well, still making it an emotional and impactful ending. But to me personally, I do think that the most likely scenario would be that the stranger wouldn't have had any sort of leverage, like I said. So I just don't think anything really would have come of it, besides maybe the stranger showing up with like a gun and trying to kill some of the group members within the group. At least that's what I think. But it's so up in the air for interpretation at that point. But the only issue with this is that the game just would not have been as interesting. I think the game needed something like, a Clem, someone for us to look after, someone for us to bond with, someone for us to really want to take care of, in order for us to really understand how detrimental it could be to have emotional attachments to people in the zombie apocalypse. And it kind of showed about passing down the torch to the younger generation, showing them the tools that they're going to need in order to survive. And that's exactly what Lee did for Clem in the end. Even though he died, he passed on all this knowledge to her. So even though it is sad, and part of me wishes that Lee had never died and we could have seen him in seasons 2 or 3 or even 4, it is probably a good thing that we got the ending that we got to show the impactfulness that nobody is safe in this new evil world. Nobody is safe no matter what. Not even you as the player is guaranteed to be safe. And I think that's what makes this even more interesting. But you know what, guys? I guess we'll never know what would have happened. But let me know your guys' thoughts down in the comments below. Because this is kind of something that seems interesting on paper, that, like, oh, what would have happened? But at the end of the day, we still got an amazing game. And in my opinion, the best game of the 4 is Season 1. So I'm kind of glad that we got the game that we got in the end, ultimately. It's just kind of like a what if part. There's always that part of me that's like, I wish Lee was still alive, but I understand that for the sake of character growth and development, he couldn't be by Clementine's side forever. I understand that. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, make sure to leave a thumbs up and make sure to subscribe for more content. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.